Okay. The topic for today is emotional journey, which is a fairly recent, what has been propagated as a fairly recent technique of healing. The process by itself is recent, but what it's based on is age old. It draws on several concepts of psychology. And the process was, the name emotional journey was given by this lady called Brandon Bays. An American lady who, her story is quite interesting. She, at the age of about 39, 40 or so, she was detected with a basketball-sized tumor in her uterus. And this lady was already for years into a profession of healing, holistic healing and counseling and all of that. So she didn't want to go the medical route, because she believed that medicine unnecessarily chemically pollutes the body without entirely healing it. So she wanted to try the alternate route, in spite of the fact that doctors warned her that it's already a basketball-sized tumor in the uterus, which means you can't really wait because it will lead to serious complications. So she was given 6 weeks by the doctors, in which they said that's the maximum we can stretch. You do whatever you want in 6 weeks, but after that come back to us and we'll have to surgically get it out. And then this lady went on this journey to figure out what caused the tumor in the first place, because given the profession that she was in, she was already into holistic healing, she was a vegetarian and all of that, she was into meditation and spirituality. So she believed that she was leading a fairly good lifestyle, and there was nothing that could cause a tumor, given that she thought she was quite emotionally and mentally well balanced. And then she went over the course of the next 1 month after detection of the tumor, she went into this journey to figure out where does that tumor come from, what is the emotional basis on which the tumor got formed. Of course, here we are operating on the premise that all diseases are psychosomatic, they're caused by an emotional problem, not so much by a pure physical cause, right? So she went on this journey, and through the help of several different methodologies and several healers, she came to a point where she realized that the tumor was the manifestation of a suppressed emotion way back in childhood, when she was about 5 or 6 years old, when her sister happened to die due to drowning accidentally in a lake. And in the process, obviously the parents were in a mood of grief and they missed her sister, and in that process, for a brief period of time, they did not pay her any attention. They, because of the fact that one child was lost, they disregarded the other child for a brief while, and that caused a lot of trauma, because she was a child and she didn't quite understand the whole idea of death and grief, and she didn't quite know why her parents were not paying attention to her. And that suppressed emotion, which she didn't even realize was suppressed, came up as the cause. And the moment she came down to that emotion, identified it, resolved it, the tumor went off by itself. And medically, it's a documented case. It was considered a miracle by doctors that the tumor went off. It took 6 weeks for the tumor to completely go off, but after that there's been no recurrence or yeah, it's medically, of course, documented as a miracle, and they have records of the tumor before and after, and the whole medical thing is in place. So on the basis of that, she wrote a book called The Journey, where she documented the whole process of what she calls the emotional journey. Now here we are operating on the premise that any kind of an ailment could be most ordinarily physical, but it could also be an emotional or mental ailment. All of these are caused due to suppressed emotions. So we are operating on that premise, and the journey is about identifying that emotion which can cause an ailment and then trying to resolve it. That's what the whole process is about. So before we start, a quick thing on what emotions can do to us and what do emotions mean in the first place, right? I'm sure we've discussed this in several of our talks before, and we've had our own reflections on what emotions mean. Now, emotions come from our identity. Do we resonate with this? Given that we have an identity, I know who I am, therefore I have emotions, right? Let's say if you look at identity as in what I may call as ego, but not ego in the pride sense of the term, but ego as in I know who I am and I value myself for whatever I am, right? So I'm talking of the psychological sense of ego, not so much ego as in pride and egoistic. Self-identification, let's say, yeah? So an emotion is a response of the ego to our environment, right? So let's say I'm walking on a road and somebody accidentally bumps across, right? The person may not have intended it, but my ego says I have a certain identity, I should be allowed my space to walk freely, right? So if someone bumps me, I'm supposed to get upset about it, I'm supposed to be angry about it. So that's the context in which we're talking of emotion. Or let's say somebody gives me a gift on my birthday, my sense of identity says that this person has recognized or valued me and therefore presented me with a gift, so therefore my emotion is that of happiness or satisfaction, right? So emotion comes from that space of identification, right? And emotion is a response to a certain environment. So the environment could include people, it could include situations, it could be thought, it could just be an empty room which triggers a certain reaction. Right? So that's environment, and emotion is the response of the ego to the environment. Right? Now, how do emotions operate? Do we live with a certain emotion throughout our life? Or is there a predominance of a certain emotion? No? Yes? And well, when you say predominance, do you think it can't change, or we choose not to change it?
Sometimes we choose not to change it.
Right? Yeah. We get comfortable with that emotion. Now, whether it's positive or negative is not really the question, but we get comfortable.
Sometimes we get payoffs.
Yes, of course. There are payoffs for negative emotions as well, huge payoffs. Right? So let's say if I'm feeling very miserable about something, I may choose to stay with feeling miserable because there is a payoff. I may get a lot of attention because I'm miserable, right? Yeah, children learn through adults, of course, right? So yes, there could be a lot of payoffs either way, positively or negatively. So when we talk of emotion now, here we're dealing largely with what we call, in a general context, positive psychology or Ericksonian psychology, where we talk of emotions in the context of present and future. We're not talking of the Freudian aspect of psychology where we say we're affected by emotions in the past. Yes, we are affected by it in the past, but then we have to deal with it in the present and future. We can't really go into the past and deal with it, right? So if you look at the broad aspect of it, there are only two ways in which we can respond to our emotions. One is you accept it, or we resist it. Okay? And here I'm deliberately using the term resist and not reject, because emotions to us are very real, so we can't entirely reject it. Right? We can only offer resistance and say I choose not to look at it, but we will definitely know it's there. Okay? Let's say, for example, if there is an emotion of grief, we've lost somebody, right? Now I may choose to resist that emotion of grief and say no, I'm not going to cry. But the very fact that I'm telling myself I'm not going to cry is an indication that I can't reject that emotion. I know there is a need to cry. Right? But I'm only offering resistance. So we can either accept or we can resist an emotion, emotion being a response to our environment. Response of the ego to the environment, that is this. So you have acceptance and resistance, and we're talking of dealing with emotions either in the present or in the future. So if you look at a graph here, if we resist emotions in the present, what are we likely to create? I'm sorry? Madness, okay. Yeah, that's a very high degree of it. Suppression in some sense, right? Some form of suppression, and that suppression leads to some kind of a discomfort. We can put it as, let's say, resentment in a very general sense, right? We resent the fact that we're feeling in a certain way, right? So at the present level, it causes resentment. What if we continue to resist? What do we get into in the future? Turmoil, yes, that it builds up, and what he terms as madness could set in a certain sense, if the emotional imbalance.
Affect our thinking and it becomes belief.
It might start
Yes,
reflecting
it
on the
becomes
self.
belief, right? Let's talk of a collective emotion. For example, where we go into a government office for some work, right? Somebody asks for a bribe, right? Obviously, we resist the emotion, right? But if for some reason there is no other way out and you're asked to shell out that 50 or 100 bucks to get the work done, there is obviously resentment against the person who's asked for it and the whole system in general, right? Now, if that continues, if the trend continues, we've not dealt with the resentment, we've not let it out, we've not shared it, dealt with it in any which way. It could be expression, it could be going out filing a complaint, it could be talking to someone about it. If you're not doing it, what does it build into? Frustration. As he says, it becomes a belief over a period of time, all officers are corrupt, right? Which may not be the case, but because we've not dealt with it, we generalize it.
We will keep those money ready before he asks.
Yeah, then it becomes an assumption. Then we propagate the behavior instead of being asked for it, right? Because somewhere we resign to the situation, right? So now, if you look at it collectively, a lot of us have a sense of resignation about a lot of things in the country, right? All officers are corrupt, or roads never get done properly. We make those generalized statements which are expressions of resignation, which when resentment piles up over a period of time, that's what we are leading to. The other choice for us when it comes to dealing with emotion is accepting. Now, accepting doesn't necessarily mean embracing the emotion and saying, all right, I'll be sad all my life, right? We're not talking